Okay, we're back. We're talking relevance engineering, GEO, and like what the heck people are supposed to do when it comes to the direction, the future of search that SEO is going. Mike, you're having lots of conversations with executives talking all about measurement, reporting. Things are changing. We're seeing the great decoupling, impressions going up, traffic going down. There's a lot to answer to for CMOs and heads of SEO in terms of like what is the performance marketing aspect of SEO, and you've thought a lot about it. So if you could walk me through the conversations you're having, where we've been and where we're going.
Yeah, everyone wants to know like how do you measure it? A lot of people want to know how you get started with this stuff, but I typically say measurement is the place to start because you want to know where you stand. And the way I look at it is there's three stratifications here on how you need to do your measurement. One, there's like input metrics, then there are, the channel metrics as far as like visibility and branding, things like that. And then there's your standard performance metrics because these things do give you referral traffic and ultimately those don't change. Like, are these people converting? What sort of actions are they taking on the website and things like that. So I'll go into more detail on that stuff, right? So when we talk about input metrics, we're talking about like what things do you have control over that impact the visibility in these different surfaces. So, one of the things that we look at is like the passage relevance scores. So, scoring individual passages in your content against the queries, the synthetic queries, to see like how well you're doing, and then also comparing that against your competitors, specifically the ones that are appearing in these citations. And then some of these input metrics also overlap with classic search because, since AI overviews, AI mode are using Google's index, you want to make sure you're indexed. And on that indexing, you want to make sure that your content is available because, not just in the case of Google, but when these other services are ingesting this data that they're pulling from Bing and Google as far as like the results, they are crawling those or requesting those pages in real time. So they don't do JavaScript indexing or excuse me, JavaScript rendering. So they aren't going to see everything if JavaScript is being used to surface that content. And then, of course, you want to look at the classic rankings as well, because again, that is an input that informs what might get surfaced in these different systems. And then you also want to look at bot activity because, there's no connective tissue between these channels. Like there's no search console for ChatGPT and things of that nature. There's no search console for AI overviews or AI mode either. They're just rolling that in with all the other data and you can't parse it out separately. So you want to get a sense of how often your content is being requested, because that's the only thing that you can know as to whether or not you are being considered in these environments on a regular basis. And then there's the channel specific metrics. So I think that Profound does the best job of this thus far, and I think it's going to continue to be that way, even though a lot of people are copying them. But they give you visibility, they give you share of voice, they give you citation appearances. They also give you that like side by side by channel with competitors. They're also looking at sentiment analysis as well, which is, kind of strange because all of these channels say like, hey, you just present the information without some sort of bias, but interpretation of information is always inherently biased. So I think it's good that they look at that, even though by design it's not supposed to be any different. But again, like there's no connective tissue between these channels. So the visibility isn't actually known because they're probabilistic. And even with a tool like Profound, it's a snapshot of what version of this is seeing. So it's not inherently accurate because there's no way to be accurate. But it is precise. So like as long as the methodology is the same, you're going to get consistency. And also the click-through rates are very opaque as well because you don't know how often you're showing up, but you do know how many clicks you're getting just from your standard analytics. And so the big thing to know here is that it's going to be very difficult to attribute success because there's no connective tissue. It's also going to be quite difficult to demonstrate the ROI because of that. Because if you're like, okay, most of this is a branding channel, well, unless you're doing some sort of like lift study, where you're saying like, okay, well, we've done some stuff, we know that we have better visibility in ChatGPT or whatever, and we saw a lift after that. That's the only way that you can really know, but it's not going to be like perfectly attributable through, end to end like we're used to. But again, the performance metrics as to how many of these people click through from these channels to your website, and then what do they do? Do they buy something? Do they sign up for the mailing list? Is their time on site or engagement high? Is it a reduced bounce rate? Like all those typical measures are still in play. So the whole point is that you got to think of this, in a stratified way, rather than just like, okay, well, did it drive traffic? Did it, perform once it did? Because most of what's going to happen in these channels is going to be more akin to what you see from like branding channels or even social media, right? Because like when you think about social media, um, people are like, cool, I got to get all the likes, I got to get all the shares, all the followers, but like that doesn't actually do anything. It just gives an opportunity for your stuff to be seen. And we don't have these measures of impressions yet, but we do know what happens once users come to your site. And one more thing I want to say is that this clickstream data that you get from companies like Datos and SimilarWeb and so on is going to become way more valuable because of that lack of connective tissue until ChatGPT rolls out their version of a search console or something like that. And I would hope they do, because they've taken so much from the internet, including the traffic. I would love for them to give us something back.
It's awesome and comprehensive. And so like to your point about people not knowing where to start, there you have it laid out. There are so many metrics to create and report on. And obviously, there's going to be two different levels, right? You have the SEO managers in the weed, you have the department heads, and then the CMOs. And there's going to be a lot of education going both ways. I feel like if you're a CMO and listening to this, then you're telling your team, okay, do you have all these metrics and can you get them? And if you're a team, you're leveling up to your CMO, being like, things are different. So when you hear the conversations around KPIs,
Mhm.
what should a CMO or a head of a department expect to see, and how should they communicate that to their team?
Yeah, I think they need the top level measures from a branding perspective and the top level measures from a performance perspective. Like they don't need the input metrics. They just need to know like, okay, what is our visibility in the channel? And then how much traffic did we get? And then what did it do? And again, the visibility is more like from a brand perspective, because they want to know like, okay, we're getting XY visibility for these topics that we care about. And also, thinking about those from like three different layers as well, like the brand protection. How is our brand being talked about in these channels? And then the broad non-branded terms that are being asked about in your space, and then the more specific ones that are more longer tail. And so the visibility needs to be broken out in that way, because that's the order in which you want to go after these as well.
We're so used to talking about the marketing funnel, and the conversational journey feels a lot messier. Are
Mhm.
you changing how you're thinking about like top of funnel, middle of funnel, bottom of funnel, or is it still the same, just slightly mapped more granularly and more kind of more breadth, if you will?
Yeah, I don't think we've collectively as an industry decided, what the buckets are for prompts yet. And, a lot of people are still living on the navigational, informational, transactional queries, but there's so many more intents that happen conversationally. And so I think that that is one thing that we need to define. In fact, maybe we'll define it. Maybe that'll be my weekend project.
I mean, it's funny to your point because I was just in AI mode the other day, and it's such a fundamental different interaction with search, because it's like you ask your initial query, you get an answer, and then your second prompt rarely has the context of your first prompt, which the interface knows because you're going back and forth in the conversation. But like when we start reporting on this sort of stuff, you miss all that. So even if people were able to track prompts, there's less value there unless it's in the context of that conversation.
Hmm. Yeah, I mean, I think we need to have like an also asked for ChatGPT or all these different platforms. But I think the problem is that there's going to be so many variants of what the prompts are. So even with that, we need to get to a point where we kind of limit it to like what are the entities that are common. You ask about these entities and you ask about these entities and so on. So yeah, I think there's a lot of work to still do to codify what all this is. And I don't feel like there's enough people driving that layer of it. Because when you think about, the search taxonomy of informational, navigational, and transactional, that came from a guy that worked at Google, or still works at Google, like the guy
Okay.
Andre Broder that wrote that Delphic cost paper, and he's also added a new one to it called Hedonic. So I feel like it's going to be kind of similar to the Generative Engine Optimization paper, where some computer scientists got together and said, like, here's what this is, here are the things you do, and then our community runs with it. Unless we step up, which I think this is a good opportunity for us to do as relevance engineers, like get a big data set of prompts and segment them to define what is that new taxonomy. In fact, I'm gonna send a couple messages as soon as we get off of here and see if we can make that happen.
I have my last question is kind of on a practical level. Like we at iPullRank, we're super technical, right? Like we get in the weeds, we understand how all of this works, and that's why clients come to us, is because we can create a lot of the reporting. And there are a lot of sophisticated teams out there. But for the teams that, they have leadership that's so still focused on rankings. And you mentioned rankings are still a factor, at least for the time being, until traditional SEO is gone and there isn't anything to rank outside of just like visibility. How do you have that conversation around rankings and your KPIs if you are either a head of SEO talking to a CMO, or just generally within the industry? Like, how are you thinking about rankings going forward?
Yeah, I mean, I still think it's an input metric you should monitor because again, that informs what the consideration set of documents is going to be. Now, as far as it going away, I mean, at the end of the day, these are all RAG systems. There's always going to be an underlying rather, search engine that, works here. Whether or not we have visibility into that long term may be different, but I think that's gonna bring rise to someone like creating an open source search engine if we don't have it. You know what I'm saying? Like what I mean is like if we no longer have the visibility of the 10 blue links, then a company like Majestic, which is basically a search engine in reverse anyway, or like Ahrefs, which also has a search engine, they would just replicate it and tell you like, okay, for this underlying query, here's what ranks. So you would then optimize accordingly. So I still think that rankings will always be a component of this. It's just not the end all be all. It's just an input.
Yeah, no, this is great. I think it's super valuable. I think it's a really important conversation if like you're watching this and you're CMO, or if you are the head of your SEO team and you want to talk through like how to communicate that, down or up, and you want to instill like kind of set up this sort of monitoring. Like that is one of our deliverables in our program. So like schedule a call with us. Like we can kind of get, because everyone's a snowflake. Every business is different. What your unique situation is needs attention. So, thanks, Mike. I think it's super clear. People reach out to you, have these conversations, and pioneer and making stuff happen, and kind of like reshaping the industry, because things are changing a lot, and it's fun, but for a lot of businesses, it's kind of terrifying.
I loved it. I was pretty bored for like a good 5 years with this space, and now it's like every day it's something new. So I love it.
There you go. So Garrett Sussman, Mike King, iPullRank, hit us up, and we'll see you soon.